My name is Christopher Merrill, and as the director of the International Writing Program, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our weekly panel discussion here in the Iowa City Public Library. A couple of housekeeping notes. First, please silence your cell phones. You'll see on the chairs around you index cards and pencils for you to write questions for our distinguished guests on the panel. And a reminder that you can find more information about these writers, their bibliographies, samples of their work, and upcoming events at the IWP on our website. That's iwp.uiowa.edu. My gratitude to Susan Craig, the librarian here at the Iowa City Public Library, who makes this space available to us, and to her very talented staff, as well as to Downing Thomas, who provides the pizza in the back. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce a guest moderator for this panel, Sandy Barkin, who was a longtime faculty member here at the University of Iowa, associate dean in the Graduate College, and most importantly for the IWP, an interim director in that crucial year when it took all of the community's efforts to keep this program alive. When I arrived on campus in 2000, I like to tell people the very first gift I received was a plant from Sandy Barkin in our new house. And that was only the first of many gifts that she offered, revolving in large part around mentoring me in the ways of the university, in the ways of cultural exchange. And we're so lucky she's back in town today from her job in Washington, D.C., where she continues to do this very important work of cultural exchange from Meridian International. Please join me in welcoming Sandy Barkin.
Thanks a lot, Chris, and what a pleasure for me to be back here with the writers and with other visitors from the community on a day where clearly Chris and Natasha chose the topic knowing who yesterday's Nobel Prize winner in literature would be. And they fixed all this. And they've set it up for 5 wonderful writers who are here, who can only enrich Mr. Dillon and enhance what he's done. Great fun to have Bob Dylan as a Nobel Prize winner. The topic today is the sound of your words, the line on your screen. And it's a topic that in some ways relates to literatures historically in many different cultures. I think of my own training in French literature and early 20th century, late 19th century poets like Mallarmé, who talked about synchronicity, who were interested in the visual as well as the word in their poetry. My work in African literatures where music and the oral word, oral literatures come together in such important ways. And we have now new developments, new media, new social media, new technology that makes other kinds of synchronicity possible. And so we have 5 wonderful writers. Hensli, RAHN, SOLÓRZANO from Venezuela, and I think I'll introduce them all now and then let them just go right ahead and talk, and there'll be time at the end for some further discussion with the cards that you've got on your chairs. So, Mr. SOLÓRZANO from Venezuela has written many stories, including Crónicamente Caracas, Dinero Fácil, and has been widely acclaimed for his short story book of the year. He's contributed to many literary journals, but he's also a songwriter, a guitarist. His band, Utopista Sur, has released an album, and he, I think, will be talking about how all of that music and narrative come together. He's currently based in Berlin. I guess things in Venezuela are a bit challenging right now. Mara GENSCHEL, who is from Germany, has published her first book of poems, Tonbrand Schlaf, in 2008. And she works on projects which involve visual and oral aspects of poetry and publishes book art, there's a wonderful book art exhibit right now at the Smithsonian in Washington. And she collaborates with performance artists. Lee Chae-won from South Korea, an essayist, novelist, studied French literature, and her work has won the Hyundai Munhak Award for Novels in 2010, and she was acknowledged by the Arts Council of Korea in 2012. And she has also won awards for her 2014 short story collection. Christine Johannes from Ethiopia, and Christine was just telling me that Johannes is John in Amharic. Yeah, because I've spent time in Ethiopia and I hadn't heard that name. She conducts poetry workshops in schools, founder of the monthly Poetic Saturdays, bringing together people where everyone can express themselves through art. And her poetry collection, Missing Words, appeared in 2014. And finally, CHEN Ko Hua from Taiwan is a doctor, studied at Taipei Medical University and Harvard Medical School. And like many famous writers who were doctors, it's wonderful to have a doctor here from Korea who's also a writer. He now practices as an ophthalmologist at the Taipei Veterans General Hospital and has written more than 20 volumes of poetry. Prolific. His collection, Tears of Ignorance, was recently translated into Japanese, and he often writes about topics. His work often addresses the LGBTQ issues so prevalent in society. Okay, and we'll begin with Mr. SOLÓRZANO.
Hi. Thank you very much. Ambidextrous. Everyone who knows me knows that I play guitar with my right hand and write with my left. When I write my stories, I need a kind of raw material that only popular songs can give me. Through intuition, I approach my text in an auditory way. I emphasize rhythm, rhyme, and pauses. It's like transcribing sound, a melodic voice that tells you something and won't leave you in peace until you leave it written. That's how I composed my two books of prose, Crónicamente Caracas and Dinero Fácil. For as much as my creative work is experimental in character, in general, I don't consider literature music, nor music literature. I just cultivate two distinct modes of expression with distinct techniques and traditions, more especially two genres, stories and songs. The first interests me as a sound object, and the second as a literary artifact. The latter is the musical genre I'm most passionate about studying, the union of music and text. There are Spanish-speaking songwriters like Joaquin Sabina or, more recently, Jorge Drexler, who have lifted the genre to limits bordering on literature. Emboldened by them and by the rest of my musical library, I studied letters with a simple premise: to improve the lyrics of my own songs. To this day, in my projects, I normally combine resources of both mediums. It's a method that has been the most effective for me up to this point. I'm not worried about whether this bitonality lends profundity to my text. I doubt, moreover, that this tick of mixing things helps my work be more successful or get more internet traffic. And that's why I'm the first to ask myself, What the devil does all this mixed media mean? I don't have just one answer. I guess it would be ridiculous to live in this 2.0 era as if we didn't live in it. Today, every object is a mosaic of various mediums. I think, for example, about the book/academic aptitude test facsimile, translated as multiple choice, by the Chilean author Alejandro Zambra, or the picture book/idea vignettes Ultraviolencia by Miguel Noguera of Catalonia, Spain, and the bestseller Modern Love, in which the North American comedian Aziz Ansari and sociologist Eric Klinenberg come up with an eclectic inventory of love in the modern-day world by means of a mashup of short stories, jokes, photos, chat screens, statistical graphs, and memes. Back to my own situation. Would our young ambidextrous hero gain more lyricism, better ability to tell story in the throes of his career in letters? Would he be able to sound distinct? Those were the years of my band Autopista Sur, which means South Highway, and the record Caracas se quema, Caracas is burning. An experiment between friends with electric guitars and literary songs. Perhaps it was naive of me not to foresee that I would hang up my instrument in order to sit down to write something longer with my left hand. And once I finish with my left, to use my right, as happens only to those who write with both hands. Thank you.
To perform a frame of forms is certainly an archaic but high challenge. Reflecting one's media might be the most obvious, though laziest way to fulfill it. To perform a frame of forms in a panel that asks me to reflect my media, reflecting my media means to perform a contradiction. To perform a frame of forms in a panel that asks me to reflect my media, reflecting my media in order to perform a frame of forms, means to perform a contradiction in the shape of a repetition. Repetitions might be considered as frame. To force a group of 10 to 30 people to implement a simple action at the same time might be considered as frame. To create noise by forcing a group of 10 to 30 people to implement a simple action at the same time over and over might emphasize the unbalanced distribution of authority in certain agreements on social conventions and might not necessarily be political. However, it might be considered as frame. Let me tell you 2 jokes. One. Take an airfield in the sunset. Watch a flight line marshal conducting a group of people tightly fastened into their seats. It is an enlightening example of unbalanced authority in an average reading situation. Here, a fragile, awkward performing body, taking high risks for low wage, to supervise an unconcerned instrument, with a sleepy, unconcerned audience inside, except it's Syrian refugees who are not considered to be Syrian refugees. 2. The eyes are the nipples of your face, Anna Faris advises her college housemates in The House Bunny. Political keywords are the nipples of a commercial writer's protesting attitude. She would certainly advise mine. To arrange Syrian refugees in various lines on a page in order to create a political situation is as freeing as creating a musical situation by arranging repetitions on a stage. To create noise by installing a feedback system of self-reflection is as freeing as installing a loop station with political concern. To reproduce a given structure in order to install my loop station of political concern is as freeing as feeding a still stable publishing industry which longs to be supplied with traditionally handcrafted products with traditionally handcrafted products. To deliver reproduced structures with highlighted nipples of political keywords to the publishing industry is just as pornographic as an average company of college comedy productions can bear to be. To feel afraid about one's formal options as a writer today does not necessarily mean to disregard the political dimension of form. To disregard the political dimension of form does mean to disregard the conditions and frames of writing. To feel afraid about the conditions and frames of writing does not necessarily mean to have to work with multimedia. However, to use multimedia without fraying of forms is just as pornographic as to deliver reproduced structures with highlighted nipples of political keywords, or to perform the fraying quality of a take-home message by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 500. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 523. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 546. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 569. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 592. I have 700. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 615. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 638. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 661. Or to perform the fraying quality of take-home messages by a writing that reflects its media in an amount of exactly 684. Or to perform the fraying quality of a take-home messages by a writing that reflects its... Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Wish to become an unforgettable flower. In the modern arts, the standard of worth is originality in any genre. The work needs to have its own individuality, and the worst thing is appearing similar to other work. There are many possible topics around us, and we must first choose one, then choose how to express it. This is a sense of beauty in modern art and creates a standard for art. However, this sense is in a state of flux and changes frequently. I think the novel has less mobility. It changes very slowly and dully. And the most difficult part is reflecting that change. Fiction takes much longer than other genres to catch on to new trends. Now, pairing fiction and media is more useful than at any other time. Actually, pairing media with fiction is growing in South Korea. A great deal of fiction has been paired with theater and is also blended with film, music, and TV dramas. After the year 2000, many magazines, newspapers, and writers' memorial associations began to offer literary awards for multi-genre work with monetary prizes. I wrote a novel for young adults, which was a winner, so I also received prize money. The story is about a girl who is a student at Northwest Junior High School in Coralville, Iowa. Her family has been shocked not only by her dad's bankruptcy, but also by the news of a terrible shooting at a high school in Colorado, which deeply affects the main character's school and the whole country. She overcomes her grief by drawing murals on the wall in her school as part of an important project under the name of the Celebration for the New Millennium. The murals open a new world for her. The prize winners have written in several different genres. Some of the winners wrote multi-genre work, which has been growing. I think the pairing of work from different genres seems to be similar to the relationship between one's foreign language and native language. I'm also not sure what this panel exactly focuses on, because English is a foreign language for me. It never comes quite clear for me. I hear it only indistinctly. Whenever I hear it, it appears through the mist. I feel like I am veiled in this mist. So I just wrote this according to what I understood. For many people, reading is more difficult than watching movies. They don't want to read boring narratives. But when fiction is paired with media, the story comes clear for those who don't read books, and it brings them close to the original literature. This makes understanding the original plot easier and might also lead people to buy the book. It's like opening a new world to people who are not familiar with a written language. Understanding a language is not so different from gaining a new world. In the same way, if I am paired with someone who helps me to speak English, I understand more clearly. Now I refer to a Korean poem. Until I spoke her name, she had been no more than a mere gesture. When I spoke her name, she came to me and became a flower. Now speak my name, one fitting this color and other of mine. As I spoke her name, so that I may go to her and become her flower. We all wish to become something. You to me and I to you. Wish to become an unforgettable gaze. My fiction and essays have been made into audiobooks and ebooks, but have not progressed in more various genres, though I hope this will be the case. As the poem says, I hope it will become your flower someday too. Thank you.
Thank you. Words only account for 7% of communication, and 93% is nonverbal. Sounds of words? Which words? Which sounds? Isn't it like talking about food? talking to an Italian about Ethiopian food, to an Ethiopian about French food, the possibilities are endless. Now, imagine talking about food to someone from all three, where injera and its different sauces are preceded by salad and cheese and followed by a tiramisu. The flavors, the smells, and the clinging and clanging would be beautiful. But imagine the mess. The aromas of French, the spiciness of Amharic, the juiciness of Italian, the crunchiness of English. I'm sorry, I'm gonna start again. I missed a part. Words only account for 7% of communication, and 93% is nonverbal. In 1971, Albert Mehrabian discussed nonverbal communication in his book Silent Messages. After doing research, some might agree and some might not that these results are accurate, but we don't all need to agree. Among those that debunked this theory is a certain Phil Yaffe, who went so far as to say, have you ever heard the adage that communication is only 7% verbal and 93% nonverbal? You probably have, and if you have any sense at all, you have ignored it, he said. According to Phil, nonverbal communication can only convey emphasis and emotion and merely supports verbal communication, the actual message conveyor, by stating that if words are incapable of getting the message across, no amount of gestures and tonal variations will do it. He proved his refutation of this adage, as he calls it, by admitting that though we live in a visual world, most information is still promulgated in written form, where tonal variety and body language play no role, because even interaction via the internet is still written. Isn't that changing, though? Sounds of words? Which words are we talking about? Which sounds? Isn't it like talking about food, wouldn't you say? Talking to an Italian about Ethiopian food, to an Ethiopian about French food, the possibilities are endless. Now imagine talking about food to someone from all three, where injera and its different sauces are preceded by salad and cheese and followed by a tiramisu. Now imagine that with languages. The flavors, the smells, and the clinging and clanging would be beautiful, but imagine the mess. Cleaning up in that kitchen won't be an easy task. I don't know about you, but I would eat there. As a matter of fact, I have, and I still do. The aromas of French, the spiciness of Amharic, the juiciness of Italian, the crunchiness of English, and each bite of the unknown fruits, grains, and flavors of kaifalhal, and akpekaka, and choga toshiaochen, and moshimoshi, mirajuta, and so many other words I allow my tongue to journey through is a mixture of its own. So which sounds of which words are we talking about? Each language resonates at a different frequency that when zooming in, I realize each word has its own frequency in each respective languages. Like a ladle, it didn't evoke the same feelings of slight hunger pangs in my stomach as a mama saya would, simply because I was told as an 8-year-old to pass it to my great-grandmother or my mother when they cooked, and I knew then that food was almost ready. I never passed the ladle around in the kitchen. I passed the mama saya. Neither did I pass the spoon at the table. I passed the cuillère. These words in English don't have a strong attachment with food for me as they would in Amharic or in French. In Amharic and all of its words, I hear home. In French and all of its words, I hear freedom. In English and all of its words, I hear peace. But there's a different type of comfort that I hear when I hear all three in one. Semima, do you want to go faire les courses, Naga? Mnemonics were tactics I used a lot when I was little, in order to bounce from one language box to another. But it wasn't done with one mode of understanding. Upon hearing a word, I would instantly picture it written, and an image would follow. And if it was a word I was familiar with, other drawers would open up my understanding of the word, linked to its smell, its feel, and its taste. Only then could I ever be certain that I had a full understanding of the words I encountered. Moreover, the words in all 4 of the different languages I grew up with made me realize that each language had a set of instruments in a bigger orchestra that played inside my head. A little like a distinctive yet interrelated set of orchestras within a larger orchestra. Before I tried to master, because I don't master any of them, of the languages and their words, I moved from one to the other by following the sounds that were most familiar, assimilating the sound to the words, taste, smell, and anything else I could associate them with. Then I discovered that words could exist without sound when I befriended a deaf-mute girl called Helen, and I learned sign language for 3 months. Words took on a different form, and I realized that sound is not only heard by the ears, but can be felt as well. Words are not only read, they can be tasted. Now, imagine if music met words on a dance floor and tasted to feel each moment through the arts. We put together a 1-minute video with a friend of mine that is doing his PhD in Ireland. He is a dance instructor. He is doing his PhD in ethnology, so he's concentrating on Ethio-modern dance. His name is Michael Courtney, but more popularly known as Russ Mikey. He's put together a little choreography with a poem that I wrote for this panel. Kelsey's gonna help me put it together. Maybe the lights, thank you. I can scream at the top of my lungs so calmly. I will keep quiet, but vibrate at anger's frequency. I will tell you I hate you with all the love I possess. I can show you my love through hateful feelings of distress. Here is the dichotomy of life. It's dissonance. Because you should know this, and only this. If you choose to rely only on what you see, should you believe only what you hear from me, would you depend on what you read solely? You'd be staring at a drop and not the entire sea. You see?
The marketing of my poetry, a sharing. I started writing poetry way back in the 70s when I was in high school. At university, I went on to win several national poetry and literary awards and even become a published author. However, I realized despite winning all those prestigious awards at the international level, very few people knew of me or my poetry. This was because my work was regarded as hipster literature. It was not glamorous to be associated with that stereotype. Back in the day, hipsters were pale, overly sentimental, unrealistic, good-for-nothing youth. Later, I got to know some film and music producers. One of them are a director who are rather famous at that time. When he found out that I wrote poems, he invited me to write the lyrics for the sing song of his new film. Thus, I took on a new identity, lyricist. Within the next 3 years, I composed the lyrics for nearly 100 pop songs, one of which was Taipei Sky, 1983. It was the theme song of a primetime television show, my first taste of fame. A while later, the song topped karaoke television charts and one of the most sung songs at KTV around Taiwan. Even now, Taipei Sky is still one of the must-sing KTV tunes for Taiwanese abroad, especially when they are homesick. The Chinese characters for poem, 诗, and song, 歌, was often combined to form 诗歌, meaning poetry. This shows that since ancient times, poetry and music has been so closely linked that they are almost the same thing. Words, when enhanced with music, take one new potential. Therefore, in addition to writing poetry, I have experimented with combining poetry with other art forms. Many musicians have since requested to cooperate with me. The result was a series of small-scale concerts called Dialogue Between Poetry and Music. The poems, especially the more sentimental or balladic ones, become catchier when recited with accompaniment of cello and piano tunes. Such events allows both poets and the musicians to be recognized. Some years later, I have the opportunity to turn my poetry into songs. The composer made the tunes for my poems, and I performed and recorded the songs, which were released as albums. 2 poetry music albums has been released today, Gaze 2006 and Sunrise 2016. These albums contain poems that can be performed as songs, as well as poems that can be recited with musical accompaniment. In today's digital world, literary publishing is on the decline, and the poetry anthologies are becoming increasingly hard to sell. As such, I thought making my poetry into music videos. To my delight, a director friend who worked at the Taiwan Public Television Service proposed to cooperate on a project called The Face and Book of Literature. That's make 2-minute-long short films out of poems to be performed by the poet. The short films are broadcast on national television and later uploaded to YouTube. A few dozen Taiwanese poets and I participated in this project. You can readily find all the short films on YouTube. I pay meticulous attention to the jacket designs of my print anthologies. In every stage of the process, from picking out the paper for printing to deciding on outlets and fonts, I make a rich experience for my readers. I and I's signaling, for example, is bound in the style of Asian sutures. The Chinese text inside is arranged in a layout like those found in secret suture volumes, while the English text is arranged like the text in the Bible. I also included my own illustrations in the anthology. I and I's signaling went on to win the award of Best Design at the Taipei International Books Festival and quickly sold out in the bookstore. So, could you please? Many readers tell me it's the aesthetics of the book that compel them to own it. Clearly, print corporeal copies still have value in this paperless era, and there are definitely ways to sell them. For these reasons, I still pursue painting and photography. Every year, I organized an exhibition that combines ideas from my painting, music, and poetry. The most recent exhibition is on mandala paintings. Using simple, readily available software, I make short clips of my work and uploaded them to YouTube and my personal Facebook profile. This was a surprisingly effective way to quickly reach a wide audience. Usually the points I post on Facebook only receive a couple dozen likes. However, a short video clips can garner more than 100 likes in a day. I make a comic strip for my poem, The Insomniac, last year. I wonder how that will fail. Next, I hope to experiment with using my poetry and music with 3D or virtual reality technology. What an adventure of endless potential it will be.
Well, thanks to all of you. We began with the guitar and the ambidextrous writer, and we've ended with this wonderful man in the moon, as it were. We've seen the sound of your words and the non-sound of your words, as it were, with dance and art and the line on your screen. I think we'll open this up to questions now. I want to say these were wonderful. I mean, what a wonderful way to span the potentials for the arts and literature. One question that's come up here is whether or not there's an interesting and useful relationship between the sounds of words and the tone of writing. Somebody want to volunteer? Well, go ahead, Christine.
When I write my poems, they have each of the poems have their own rhythm. So the short poem that I read when the friend was dancing is a lot slower than the usual rhythms of my poems, for those of you that have already heard me reading. But even, it's not just the speed. The way that the words land on the paper, it's like each of the words have a flow to them, because it sings in my head, or rather it is loud in my head as I write them down. So it's very much correlated. Each poem comes out with its own set of sounds, and each word could be different from one poem to another.
Okay, I see some more questions. Will Dylan's Nobel laureate cause the market, we're talking about markets, for poetry to rise? What do you think? Maybe we need to talk to our market poet here. What do you think?
Oh, me? Yeah, I think the poets just to be a poet. Yeah, it's probably not a good sailor for his point. But I think now everybody can write poems and just put it on the Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. So it's a flawed. So sometimes I really feel frustrated that actually most of the poem is not poem. It's just words and a sentence, and even with terrible grammar. So I think we really need to market the good poem, especially in this internet era. And so I try to cooperate with some artists, and to do marketing business for the good poetry. That's what I think. And I think a lot of young generations, they really insensitive to words. They just use words as a tool, but know the sensation of beauty or memory or history or every sensibilities is so mixed, and I can really sense it. That's what the point really is in their mind. So I do some marketing business for my poetry, but I think that sounds stupid too. Especially I look awful in the film. But it's good to that actually you can tell the film I make, that's for young people, for teenagers, even kids. And so we must do something for the poetry in our heart. We must do something, the marketing things for the. So that's really not a business of a poet, but it's good to try, and it's a lot of pressure during this process.
Do any of the rest of you have comments about Dylan's Nobel Prize in Literature? You might be an obvious person to discuss that.
Well, I don't know, it's very unexpected. So, and it's very shocking to read all of the rejection that has arisen this decision. And when I read the arguments, well, they have a point. But I'm a Dylan fan, so I'm not the best person to speak about that.
Okay. Any of the rest of you?
I would just want to add something. For me, I think this is it's opening up a way for younger people to aspire for something different. I am from the belief that words on paper alone do not carry every sense and every message that we want to convey, at least for me. Which is why after I published my first book in 2014, we did a separate CD, a bonus track CD, with friends of mine who were playing on the guitar, and I read the poems out loud. So it was like a compilation of 10 poems, but we made audio poetry of the 8 of the poems. And I've had friends that have come up to me after buying the book that told me it was a good thing that they had the CD to help them see where the feelings and where the punchlines and what the poem itself carried. So I feel like it comes more alive when it is heard as well. Not that we have to stop reading poetry, but it just makes it better when we have different other mediums that can carry the message across as well. So I'm really happy that Bob Dylan made it.
I must say, one of the IWP writers, former writers, Kofi Anyidoho, was here and used the sound studio in North Liberty to record his poetry and published a couple of books of poetry. Some of you might enjoy looking at them, where he has the written text, but his texts, as sold, have a little sleeve on the inside with him singing, really, performing his poetry, and with musical instruments and with his singing. They're quite wonderful. And Kofi Anyidoho, from Ghana, you might want to look for that. And he's an older writer. Kofi is about my age, but has been doing this for a long time. Okay. One more here. Does anybody else in the audience? Peter, did you have a question? Because you should have a question.
I thought Googie should have got it. Now, I'm not opposed to Dylan. I used to be a long time ago in my Elvis class when I was teaching and I didn't like Dylan. There was a student in class who was determined to convert me to Dylan and prove to me he was a good singer, and he succeeded. He lent me his great albums, and I learned how other people, Dylan learned from others, and others benefited from him, such as Odetta, and Elvis recorded when Odetta's version of Tomorrow Is a Long Time. So I slowly got converted and began then to realize, yeah, the voice isn't that bad. However, Googie has been nominated many, many times, so many times, that I feel there is somebody up there, a devil up there, let's say, who's blocking it every time. So they get to say, who shall we give apart from Googie? Oh, Dylan. Who can object to Dylan getting it? But I hope Googie will get, and Googie has just come out with a new book in which he has, among other things, still found fault with Western colonialism in his country. He has not surrendered all of it, even though he praises the teachers from East Africa. He is really fair-minded, Googie is, but he's a fighter. So that's what I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Peter. And who knows, next year with Ngugi. Is that a hand back there? Yes.
I think the reason that Dylan won is because we're in a time of revolution. We're at the end of an era. The neoliberalism is fading, and what Dylan had to say is just our generation catching up with now. He was just regarded as, just a pop singer, fill arenas, drugs, and so forth. But what he says in his songs and in his poetry is what's going on right now.
It might be it might be the opposite. He got this holy, definite and final polish. I'm not against Dylan. I like this Nobel Prize decision. I don't care actually, but I'm not sure. But it would be great if it's like you say.
Our president is he rules the world. We're not getting a president, getting a new president. What is going on now, I have never seen. And I've been paying attention to elections since Harry Truman. So this has never happened in this country.
Okay, but maybe Dylan is not. You would say that Dylan still has this impact and still influences.
Yeah, because
The-
Europeans are smarter than us.
She's European.
And not to say so that a Donald Trump can come tell us all this stuff. Yes, he's right.
I think we'll have to maybe try one more question. And given the conversation it has gone, doesn't hurt to turn to love. And this is a question. I means love in Mandarin, right?
Yeah.
And so you are an eye doctor. So how your eyes see I as an RA doctor. Do you want to comment on that? And I should say right along with that, there was a question, is when the heck do you find time to practice medicine?
Yeah, just like a computer, you open to software, it can run perfectly if you. And now I'm trying to build in upgrade software. We can run that just as one software. So that would be take too much space. But I think time is always an excuse. If you really love something, you will always have time to do it. So that I have been asked this kind of question for 1,000 times, and I just say maybe being single and you just devoted yourself. That's so don't let time be your excuse.
Somehow, some of the most prolific writers have also been doctors. So maybe the way to become a writer is to be a doctor. So it's great to have all of you here. Thank you for coming. And thank you very, very much to the writers today who have helped us think about all of the ways that the arts come together to complement and enhance each other. Thank you.